Hey, everybody. It is Thursday, March 6th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to.
And Moshe, where in the world are you today?
Your clue today, for those of you watching on the YouTube, are palm trees. I have palm trees behind me.
It's not the best clue. I feel like I would think more Florida, but
Florida's
you're not
got palm
in Florida.
trees. You're right. I changed. The next clue is I changed time zones. I mean, I'm 2 time zones removed. That's your special clue. Not 3 time zones. 2 time zones removed from the Eastern time zone. I'm in Mountain Time here in Scottsdale, Arizona, giving 2 speeches today on the state of the media, news coverage of various topics. Specifically to the Center for Jewish Philanthropy here in Scottsdale. So here for a day, back to the East Coast tomorrow. But it's been a whirlwind journey from Washington, D.C., and now sipping a beverage here in Arizona. The U.S. Capitol is a lifetime away.
I feel like you're in like a nice white Henley shirt. I don't even know, somehow you look tan. There's palm trees behind you. It's like a totally different vibe than it huddled in the basement of the Capitol late last night.
For the record, folks, I had no time to tan. I think it's the lighting here. I just got off a plane here in Phoenix, found the Wi-Fi for the hotel, and here I am, Jill, so let's get to it.
All right, President Trump meets at the White House with hostages just released from Gaza, and he issues a new threat to Hamas. And it comes as in a sharp policy turn. The United States and Hamas are holding direct talks. To immigration, the Trump administration's asking for more money to deport migrants as mayors of the country's biggest cities testify about their policies on migrants. And Moshe, it was definitely heated.
Well, that was the goal, Jill. And it was on both sides. You had Republicans who called the hearing, calling out these big city mayors for not helping them and not helping the Trump administration deport illegal migrants. Meanwhile, Democrats had their own choice words, particularly for Mayor Eric Adams and the deal he recently took with Trump.
To the trade war, after an emergency call with the big 3 automakers, President Trump agrees to a 1-month pause on car tariffs. If it seems like allergy season's getting longer, it is, and you can blame climate change. To the West Coast, a big lawsuit over the massive LA County fires earlier this year. And speaking of the fire victims, Steve Carell is helping high schoolers impacted. We'll tell you how.
Best Office episode ever.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
You've probably never thought about it, but you've probably taken it a lot in your life. Aspirin. We'll tell you how it all got started.
All right, let's begin with that new ultimatum President Trump has issued to Hamas. Immediately release all remaining hostages or be destroyed. It comes as the recent ceasefire between Israel and the terrorist group has elapsed. There is no agreement on a new one, and Hamas has rejected a recent U.S. proposal for a temporary extension of the ceasefire. Israel has given Hamas a couple more days to agree to it before they say they will completely restart the war. So in a post on Truth Social, President Trump wrote, "Shalom Hamas means hello and goodbye. You can choose."
Shalom Hamas, Jill, probably 2 words never uttered in that order together before. Shalom, the Hebrew word for hello, goodbye, and peace. Hamas obviously does not speak Hebrew, but they understand Hebrew, most of them. And I think Trump, they're trying to make a point.
So it's like the aloha of Hebrew.
Yeah, but he could have gone with salam, which also...
which the same letters actually, and also means peace.
But he decided he's going to go with the Hebrew, shalom, and going to give Hamas a choice here.
So he continues, release all of the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you, over in all caps. He says only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. I am sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. This is your last warning for the leadership. Now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have a chance. And he also included a message to Palestinians writing, to the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Make a smart decision. Release the hostages now, or there will be hell to pay later. The last part of that message also in all caps. So Moshe not mincing words there, and it came after the president met with 7 of the hostages who were recently released from captivity in Gaza as part of phase 1 of the most recent ceasefire deal.
Yeah, and it comes to some of the hostages say that they were held in Gaza in private homes. So that speaks to that part of the message there from Trump to average Palestinians who live in Gaza, that if they're holding hostages, there are ramifications for that as well. The Israelis have actually offered a $5 million per person prize for Gazans who helped them find the hostages. So far, it does not appear that any of them have taken them up on that offer. And so the hostages who were freed, a handful of them, met in the Oval Office yesterday. They showed their appreciation for Trump, but also said they have confidence that he can bring home the rest of the hostages. There's about 60 of them, including one American. Omer Shemtov, one of the released hostages, told Trump in the Oval Office yesterday, "You've been sent by God to release them. You can really help. You have the power to do it." Another released hostage, Naama Levy, saying, "You were our hope when we were there, and now you're their hope." Some of the hostages saying, they believe that once Trump got elected, they would be released. He's like, "You really believe that?" And they said yes. So that was the meeting that then led to this message that Trump has issued here. And we've told you, Trump speaking much tougher on Hamas, giving Israel weapons with no limits, unlike the Biden administration here. And it does come after Biden officials, some of whom have admitted that by going so hard on Israel, criticizing Israel, that actually gave Hamas more confidence, prolonged the war, empowered the terror group, thinking there was a divide in the West, and led to some of these captives staying even longer in captivity.
The Trump White House also confirmed Wednesday that American officials have engaged in secret, direct talks with Hamas that were revealed in media reports yesterday morning. The talks are held by U.S. Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, Adam Boehler, and they're really unprecedented. The U.S. has never engaged directly with Hamas, which it designated as a terrorist organization back in 1997. But here's the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt answering a question yesterday about this seeming about-face.
If the U.S. has a longstanding policy that we do not negotiate with terrorists, then why is the U.S. now negotiating directly and for the first time ever with Hamas?
Well, when it comes to the negotiations that you're referring to, first of all, the special envoy who's engaged in those negotiations does have the authority to talk to anyone. Israel was consulted on this matter. And look, dialogue and talking to people around the world to do what's in the best interest of the American people is something that the president has proven is what he believes is good faith effort to do what's right for the American people.
So these talks apparently have focused particularly on that U.S. hostage that still remains in captivity after more than 500 days, but apparently have also included discussions about a broader deal here to release all remaining hostages and reaching a long-term truce. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister's office was asked about this, and they were very general about it. They said that Israel, quote, expressed its stance on direct talks with Hamas in its contacts with the U.S., providing no further details, opinions, support, but effectively just confirms they discussed it. Israel, of course, doesn't directly talk, but the dirty little secret in geopolitics is even if you don't have direct relations with your various adversaries and enemies, there still need to be conversations regarding various things in the world. So oftentimes, whether it's the U.S. and Russia, the U.S. and Iran, the U.S. and North Korea, Israel and Hamas, Israel and a whole bunch of its neighbors, that diplomacy is done through non-government officials. That diplomacy is done through another government. Sometimes you're literally in the same building, same hotel, but in different rooms, and someone's shuttling back and forth because you don't have official relations. So this is just basically cutting that out and saying, we're going to put Adam Boehler actually in the room with Hamas, but still pretty notable because we've all heard the criticism in the past. Like, I can't believe they're talking to terrorism. We don't negotiate with terrorists. This is literally the U.S. negotiating with terrorists, but the administration defends this based on, necessity right now. By the way, background on Boehler, if you haven't heard of him before, he's not a career diplomat. In fact, he's involved in healthcare investment. He has a healthcare investment firm, but he was put in this role here by the Trump administration. He was actually a college roommate of Jared Kushner. Kushner enlisted him a bit in the Abraham Accords. Those were the deals that Trump negotiated between Israel and several Arab countries to open up relations in the first term. Boehler went back to healthcare investment. He's now back again, engaged in Middle East diplomacy. But it speaks to the strategy Trump has brought in, which is I'm bringing people who negotiate, even if they have no real background in diplomacy. That's the same thing with Steve Witkoff, who's been leading negotiations both in the Middle East and in regards to Russia and Ukraine. Now, no deal has been reached there yet, but we will see what comes of it. Trump, of course, in his first term also led negotiations with the Taliban, who we hadn't really directly dealt with for a long time, leading to the release of 5,000 Taliban fighters as part of that deal that would eventually get the U.S. out of Afghanistan. So we'll monitor all those details. Again, it's believed there are about 60 remaining hostages in Gaza, and that includes the one American citizen hostage still there, Idan Alexander.
Okay, now let's talk about the latest on the border and immigration, a major priority for the White House, but one that President Trump needs more money for. The president is trying to persuade Congress to give his administration the resources that it needs to carry out mass deportations. The administration's looking at money for detention beds and repatriation flights. It's part of a campaign promise to remove migrants who are in the country without legal permission. On Wednesday, the president met with members of Congress in the conservative House Freedom Caucus, urging them to send him money to accelerate those removals. He made immigration as well the centerpiece of that joint address to Congress Tuesday night, touting what he calls the lowest number of illegal border crossings ever recorded. The White House says that in February, which is President Trump's first month in office in the second term, illegal border crossings fell to their lowest level ever recorded, down 94% from last February and down 96% from the all-time high of the Biden administration.
The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation. We must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president.
But it turns out we don't just need a new president. There does need to be some legislation here, despite what he said there, because Congress controls the money. And so they're going to Congress here saying we need more money for all of this. And now they have had those major successes, right? That significantly, his rhetoric, his policies have led to a significant drop on the border of people trying to cross the border. New people not coming in, but in terms of his deportation strategy, his deportation promises, it's actually some of the numbers, Jill, down from some Biden numbers when it comes to deportations. He's been making big promises and all of that. But the issue, as we've discussed on this podcast before, is a lack of resources. You need more agents. You need more facilities. You need more judges to hear the cases. Deportations don't just happen where they pick somebody up and kick them out that day. You got to go through a process. You got to go through a hearing process. There's a legal process here in the country, and you need personnel, and you need to pay those personnel to do all of that. Meanwhile, as they figure that out and they talk to Congress about that, one tactic that Trump used to deter people from crossing the border was getting the military involved. He was using those huge C-17s. Well, defense officials now say that they have stopped using military aircraft to fly migrants who enter the U.S. illegally to Gitmo or any other countries. It turns out that using military aircraft, while it certainly sends a message, has been expensive and inefficient. They take longer routes, transport fewer migrants at higher cost to taxpayers while they're engaged in this whole DOGE effort. So, for example, 3 recent deportation flights to India cost $3 million each. Some flights carried just about a dozen people to Gitmo at a cost of $20,000 or more per migrant. That's double or triple what it typically costs to deport somebody. So it appears at least that part of the plan using the military flights is over for now.
Also on Wednesday, the House Oversight Committee questioned Democratic mayors from Boston, Chicago, Denver, and New York City about their so-called sanctuary city policies that restrict cooperation with the federal government on immigration enforcement. Republicans accused the mayors of defying President Trump's immigration agenda and releasing dangerous criminals onto the streets. The hearing was combative, with Republican members of the committee aggressively questioning the witnesses and often speaking over their answers. A repeated line of questioning involved policies that keep law enforcement from working with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, until proper legal channels to obtain a warrant. By the way, a sanctuary city refers to a broad range of policies that limit local cooperation with federal immigration agents. The mayors argued that the policies are crucial for ensuring that undocumented immigrants report crimes and can access city services without fear of deportation. They made a point of noting stats that crime in their cities has dropped in recent years, and it follows a surge in violent crime during the COVID lockdowns and shortly after.
This federal administration is making hardworking, tax-paying, God-fearing residents afraid to live their lives.
So that was Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago argued that that city's immigration policies enhance safety. He says the cooperation of all people, regardless of their immigration status, is essential to achieving the city's goals of reducing crime and pursuing justice for victims. And then there's New York City Mayor Eric Adams and Denver's mayor also there. Adams was definitely one to watch because he has in the past aligned himself with some of President Trump's immigration moves. He called the migrant surge in New York the worst humanitarian crisis in the city's history. But he did note that under local law, he is required to provide housing for the migrants.
Yeah, and he also reiterated what we heard from the other mayors, that fears of deportation, the city working with ICE, would lead residents not to seek treatment for medical emergencies and avoid calling law enforcement when a crime occurs. Now, New York has spent several $1 billion on the migrant situation, and it's led Adams to want to cooperate with Trump. Also, he had his whole legal issue that sort of went away for now, partially, well, almost totally explicitly, due to the fact that the administration said this will allow him to cooperate with us on all things illegal immigration. Now, one thing we'll watch here, and I'm seeking sort of legal feedback on this, a Florida Republican, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, she's very much on the right, a huge ally of the president, said she's going to make a criminal referral to the Justice Department to investigate the mayors. She believes they're violating federal law, and so she wants them investigated and potentially prosecuted for what they're doing in their various cities. It's not clear that they're breaking any federal law here, but it appears the Justice Department, at least under the new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, will have to look into that. All right, as Jill mentioned, there were a lot of heated exchanges throughout the day. One we'll play a bit of for you. This is Congressman Jim Jordan. He's a hardcore conservative out of Ohio, grilling Denver Mayor Michael Johnston. He focused on one recent release where an illegal migrant actually assaulted an ICE officer. The background here is this guy was a gang member. He'd been in custody for about a year, apparently picked up on multiple charges. And so Jordan was hammering him on how little time ICE got and the logistics of the release, which apparently led to the authorities in Colorado releasing this guy Gonzalez not into direct ICE custody, which then led to the assault. Take a listen to a bit of the back and forth.
You release him to the streets. Why not release him to ICE?
Mr. Congressman, we notified them of release. There were 6 ICE agents present when he was released, so they had enough time to respond and to be present.
Respond where?
To the jail where we released him from. So we released him we notified them of the release time. When we notify them of release, they come to the jail facility to pick them up.
Why didn't you say, that's not what you said. You said you release him to the streets. Did you release him to the streets? You release him to ICE?
What we do, sir, is we release him from our county jail, and we coordinate with ICE on that release time and release date so that ICE can come and pick them up from that location.
Pick them up where? In the parking lot?
Yes, sir. They're on the facility
property. Guess what happened in the parking lot?
Now, the mayor says that Denver is working with ICE on release logistics. This was the first such incident that he was aware of out of hundreds of releases where this sort of thing happened, and went on to defend Denver's immigration policies. That's another city that has seen a huge surge in migrants, arguing they don't shield undocumented people from law enforcement, but instead the argument, again, from all these cities is it allows them to provide services to people.
Time for the speed read, starting with the latest on the tariffs that the U.S. has issued against Canada and Mexico, a development from the Washington Post. After an urgent call with the big 3 automakers, President Trump announced an exemption on auto tariffs for cars coming in from Canada and Mexico, but just for 1 month. Less than 48 hours after slapping tariffs on all goods from Canada and Mexico, Trump agreed to that 1-month reprieve. The decision followed a phone conversation with execs from the big 3 automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, who were looking for relief from those new import taxes. They told the president that over the past several decades, they have developed these complex supply chains that cross North American borders multiple times before delivering a finished product. The White House press secretary told reporters the president told the automakers, well, start shifting production to the United States. You've got about 4 weeks. The president essentially letting them buy a little bit of time until the tariffs kick in. But it isn't so easy because there are union contracts that could really complicate matters. Not to mention some automakers may have gotten tax breaks from local governments to produce cars in those local jurisdictions. On Tuesday night, the president said reciprocal tariffs would kick in on April 2nd.
Yeah, keep in mind, the car you drive may have gone over the border between the U.S. and Canada, U.S. and Mexico multiple times as parts are made throughout North America. Parts of the cars are put together, they're assembled, they ship then the car back to America for more assembly, then it goes back to Mexico for more assembly. The way that they've built it, because we've had a free trade agreement, whether it was NAFTA or the USMCA for more than 30 years here, is they view, all of North America as one big entity here. So you would have to build factories here or move facilities here, move plants here, you move manufacturing here, find workers, train those workers. Ain't happening in 30 days. It's likely a years-long process here. So remains to be seen what this 30-day reprieve really means and, what comes next here in April. The markets reacted positively to the news, and it had come after, we've told you about the headlines in recent days. With these tariffs, some car prices could go up 10 grand. Some cars could go up as much as 20 grand if you're talking about like a Chevy Suburban. And so dealers are worried, the manufacturers are worried, the car part makers are worried, because it's not just as simple as saying everything needs to move to America immediately. Beyond the auto manufacturers, we'll see if there's other sectors here that might get a reprieve. In the meantime, Canada and Mexico apparently have been on the phone with the Commerce Department, trying to figure out how to end this trade war among friends. Several $1 trillion in trade is done every year between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And this will, in all likelihood, mean higher prices for Canadians, for Mexicans, and Americans on hundreds, if not thousands, of different items and goods.
From ABC News in Los Angeles County filed a lawsuit Wednesday against Southern California Edison, hoping to recover costs and damages caused by the Eaton fire. That was the fire that destroyed large parts of Altadena and Pasadena. The county's lawsuit claims that witnesses, photos, and videos show that the fire started directly under transmission lines in Eaton Canyon. The lawsuit was filed against SCE and Edison International and alleges that SCE's equipment caused the deadly fire, requiring the county to incur massive costs responding to the fire and its aftermath.
The cities of Pasadena and Sierra Madre are also filing lawsuits against Southern California Edison for damages to taxpayer resources and public infrastructure incurred from the fire. Now, a reminder here, the Eaton fire burned more than 14,000 acres, destroyed more than 9,000 structures. Many of those thousands of homes and businesses resulted in 17 deaths. LA County's lawsuit claims that the Eaton fire has massively impacted the county's natural resources, harmed the environment, wildlife, and threatened public health. A spokesperson for the power company released their own statement saying, "Our hearts are with the communities affected by the wildfires. We're reviewing the lawsuits that were recently filed and will address them through the appropriate legal process." This wouldn't be the first time, Jill. In Hawaii, those Lahaina Maui fires, they also are going after the power company there for the lines. And then the fire that hit Paradise, California, several years ago, that was another fire where they went after the power company. And so they've had many of these. Meanwhile, they're still investigating the cause of the Palisades fire, which might have also been caused by the power company, but they're also investigating other potential elements that could have been there, including human element that someone started the fire.
And staying with the fire aftermath from CNN, seniors at 6 high schools in Altadena, California got a surprise message from actor Steve Carell on Tuesday. Their prom tickets are covered thanks to the nonprofit Alice's Kids. Carell appeared on screen at school assemblies for the about 800 students, many of whom lost their homes in the Eaton fire. Here is part of his announcement.
And if you have already paid for your prom tickets, they will reimburse you for your prom tickets. It's a pretty good deal. Have fun. Enjoy the prom. And remember, this is Steve Carell. Take it easy, guys.
So if some of you remember the Office episode when Michael Scott had Scott's Tots and promised to pay a class of students college tuition, in that episode, though, his character, Michael Scott, reneges on the promise. This time, it appears the real-life Steve Carell. It's a real promise.
And finally, a heads up for allergy sufferers. This from Axios. Most major U.S. cities are suffering from longer allergy seasons because of climate change. According to a new analysis, millions of Americans endure runny noses, itchy throats, and worse health effects each spring allergy season. The freeze-free growing season, as it's called, lengthened between 1970 and 2024 in nearly 90% of the 198 cities that were analyzed by Climate Central, which is a research and communications group. Among those cities, the freeze-free season lengthened by about 20 days on average. So what is a freeze-free period? You could probably guess, but it's basically the number of consecutive days where the minimum temperature is above 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and more days of above freezing temperatures allow for better plant growth and thus the release of more sneeze-inducing pollen.
Chew.
Chew.
I'm a Zysol person. That's my typical go-to, Jill. All of this, climate change has its winners and losers. I guess the makers of Claritin, Zyrtec, Zysol are winners with all of this. Among the American cities where you're seeing much longer allergy seasons, Reno, Nevada, 96 more consecutive freeze-free days now versus the 1970s. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Toledo, Ohio, among the cities where if you're noticing that you're sneezing for much longer or you didn't think you had allergies and now you have allergies, well, sorry if you live there. Conversely, there are a number of cities where it's now going below freezing more than before. And so you are seeing a slight decrease in allergy season in places like Waco, Texas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Denver, Colorado. Now, the thing about climate change, not only does it make pollen seasons longer, it also makes them more intense due to heat-trapping pollution, a double whammy there. And right now, the spring season is getting warmer in 96% of American counties that we have data in. Temperatures increase the most here, where I'm reporting to you from, in Arizona, as well as in New Mexico, the Northeast, while temperatures decreased in the Great Plains. All right, now to On This Day in History. We begin in 1857 with what has been called one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in history, the Dred Scott decision. It was a 7-2 ruling in 1857. They ruled in Dred Scott v. Sanford that Scott, a slave, was not an American citizen and therefore could not sue for his freedom in federal court. It stated that African Americans were not and could never be citizens of the United States. The decision added fuel to the fire that was the lead up there of the Civil War. The ruling was overturned several years later in the aftermath there of the Civil War, the 13th and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, which abolished slavery and declared that all persons, regardless of race, born in the United States are American citizens. Next to 1899, the German company Bayer patents aspirin for the first time on this day in 1899. Happy birthday, aspirin. It was originally made from a chemical found in the bark of willow trees. In its primitive form, the active ingredient was used for centuries in folk medicine, beginning in ancient Greece when Hippocrates would use it to relieve pain and fever, though they would notice this all over the world, various tribes and people chewing tree bark as pain relief. The issue was that it had a very unpleasant taste. And a tendency to damage the stomach in that form. But in 1897, a Bayer employee named Felix Hoffman found a way to create a stable form of the drug that was easier and more pleasant to take. Though notably, there was another guy named Arthur Eichengrun. He was a Jewish chemist that apparently did a lot of the work behind the scenes, but during the Nazi era, they covered up his work. And so in more recent years, they've uncovered the work that Eichengrun did alongside Hoffman. On this day in 1967, President Lyndon Baines Johnson announced a lottery system that would be implemented to determine which American man would be drafted for military service in Vietnam. Literally, they would just bring up dates in the lottery. So they're like, okay, everyone born on June 12th, everybody born on September 2nd, and so on and so forth. And depending on the lottery each year, it was the luck of the draw or the unlucky ones who were chosen at the top. They would end the draft about 6 years later. It's one of the reasons, really, Vietnam became super controversial because everyone was eligible to go into that war. And thankfully, it doesn't look like we'll ever have to have a draft ever again. A bit of food history for you on this day in 1912. The Oreo sandwich cookie is first introduced by National Biscuit Company.
Moshe, what is your favorite Oreo?
Double stuffed, Jill.
I like, first of all, no hesitation, which I appreciate.
I mean, there's all the flavors. Are you you need a flavor?
I'm not a flavor person, except I happen to love birthday cake Oreo.
Oh.
I highly recommend it. It's like the only flavor that I really like of Oreos besides original.
I've tried the other flavors. I roll with the other flavors. I like, the mint if you freeze them and then you have those Oreos, like sort of like a thin mint, like you create your own thin mint. But I digress. We'll end here with music history on this day. The Temptations score their first U.S. #1 single with My Girl on this day in 1965. Annie Lennox releases her single No More I Love Yous on this day in 1995. Jill, I will say No More I Love You is solid hit, but it's nothing like Walking on Broken Glass. Like for me, Walking on Broken Glass like is like one of my favorite songs from the 90s.
Well, the whole mood is different. No More I Love Yous is like a little depressing and sad.
True.
Walking on Broken Glass, so you could run a marathon to that. Despite the words.
But you've run multiple marathons. Was it part of your music mix?
It wasn't, but if I ever were to take up running again, maybe I would put it on. You know, there's like the marathon mix, and then there's the last 5 mile mix. It's like a separate playlist actually for the last 5 miles, at least for me. So I'd probably have it on the marathon, not the last 5.
Got it. And then a classic movie from the 90s that many of my friends like still quote from. On this day in 1998, The Big Lebowski premiered in theaters. We don't roll on Shabbos, Jill.
I've never seen it. Is that a line from the movie?
I mean, I'm not. Yeah, yes, obviously.
It must be, or else you're
like, Moshe, that's a weird thing to just say in the middle of the podcast.
Or else something is totally off. Alex, send help. All right, everybody, let's leave it there. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And review us in the App Store.
And if you couldn't get enough of this episode and you were listening to us and you want to see a beautiful sunset, watch this episode on YouTube, because literally as I recorded this, Jill, we began it just as sunset began, and now I sit here in darkness in Scottsdale, Arizona.
We need to like fast forward it. We need to figure out how to play it so it's super fast. So
like a time lapse. Yeah.
That's the official name.
That's the word. Fast forward.
We need to put it on like 6-time fast forward.
Yeah, like said like a good 80s kid. Fast forward like the VCR.
All right, I'm gonna go to Blockbuster. I'll see you guys later.
See you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News Podcast.